Okay, so let's talk about imposter syndrome. Specifically in this session, I want to introduce you to the concepts of internal and environmental imposter syndrome. Now, what you're going to hear, what I'm going to share with you is the product of my lifetime of experience having had imposter syndrome. It's also the product of the work that I do with my clients, specifically with Black lawyers who are striving to succeed in a white world. And I'm sharing with you so much of the philosophy that went into writing my book, Be the First, which was about exactly this, the experience of imposter syndrome and how that is unique in people of color. So my aim today is to really introduce you to a more nuanced understanding of imposter syndrome. And what this is going to do is it's going to give you like a deeper understanding of your experience personally, right? As a Black lawyer striving to succeed in a white world, it's going to reveal to you how imposter syndrome is holding you back in your career. And not just that, I'm also going to share with you the really simple solution that's going to change everything for you. And in fact, make imposter syndrome something you can use as an opportunity, make it something that you can turn into your strength, and make it something that is the key, it's the trigger, it's the reminder for you to access your value, believe in your value, and to show up to your highest potential. That's what we're going to get out of this episode. So the message I want you to take away today is that imposter syndrome is different for you. It is different for you as a Black lawyer striving to succeed in a white world. It's not only internal, it's environmental. So let's talk about what I mean by that. Internal imposter syndrome, that's the expression I'm using to really describe perhaps what you are already familiar with as a definition of what imposter syndrome is. So it's the thinking, I'm a fraud, my success is down to luck. Any minute now, I'm going to be exposed. Like if you have those thoughts, if you've had those voices in your head saying that or cropping up for you in those moments when you need to deliver, when you're being stretched, when you're working in a challenging environment, when you are just in any environment that makes you aware of your difference, if those are the thoughts that come into your brain, then this is classic or regular, or I call it internal imposter syndrome. It's classic imposter syndrome because these are the symptoms that were first identified by the American psychologists, Dr. Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, who first coined the term imposter syndrome. So it is kind of officially, those are the identifiers. I call this internal imposter syndrome because of where it comes from. So internal imposter syndrome comes from me. It's my awareness of my difference. And what you will notice is interesting about this is it doesn't matter how inclusive my environment is. It doesn't matter how much I have achieved. I think I'm an imposter. That's literally the thinking that I have. That's with internal imposter syndrome, so it's internally generated. Now contrast that with environmental imposter syndrome, which, guess what, no prize for guessing, comes from my environment. So environmental imposter syndrome is the product of where I work. It's the product of my workplace or my environment not being inclusive. For example, your experience might be that work allocation goes to all the private school white boys, for example. Like that would generate this environmental imposter syndrome in you. It might be down to your experience of being in an environment that is not diverse. So you don't have any role models. You look up and you see no one who looks like you. That can create environmental imposter syndrome. Maybe the environment is one where you've experienced microaggressions, you've been subjected to racism. This, again, an environmental condition that can cause imposter syndrome. And I would also include there as those environmental conditions, any environment that makes you feel like you can't be yourself, where perhaps you have feedback that says you're too assertive. Can you tone it down a little bit? This would be a classic example. So what I've described there are these environmental factors outside of you that make you aware of your difference. So you can hear the contrast there between the environmental, which is external, right? And then the internal imposter syndrome I first described to you, which is generated by you and your awareness of your difference. And so the key distinction then that I want to offer you today when it comes to understanding and really thinking about your experience and whether imposter syndrome is something that is holding you back is that imposter syndrome can occur either because you are thinking you're an imposter or because you're made to feel like one because the environment in which you work or the environment where you find yourself. That's the key. That's the difference. And both of those are two parts of the same thing, two sides to imposter syndrome. So why does this distinction matter? Why is it so important? It's important because both of those experiences talk to how you feel. And how you feel in the workplace drives how you show up to your work, how you show up to your colleagues, the work you do. And how you show up in all of those ways is what creates the result for you, for us, of not going for partnership, telling yourself you don't want it or don't believe you can get it, or with you questioning whether you'd like it when you got there. It drives the result of you deciding, do you know what, this isn't for me. This place isn't for me. This industry isn't for me. How you feel and the actions you take or how you show up drives the result of you being reactive to negative experiences by prematurely jumping ship. So having this really like a difficult experience, a traumatic experience, I know that's something a lot of you have already had, or just an experience of just feeling so terrible and unwelcome in your environment. And that driving you to react and just decide this isn't for you and leave the profession early. It drives the result of you perhaps even wanting to progress and knowing that that's what you want, but you actually getting in your own way. And I'm going to talk about some of the ways in which you do that in a moment. So let's talk about how you can tell the difference. I want to speak to the differences between the two even further in terms of your experience. And then I'm going to speak to actually their similarities. And then I'm going to go finally to the best bit, which is the really simple solution that I'm here to offer you as a result of all of my experience, all of my knowledge, all of my know-how, all of my coaching that is going to be life-changing for you when you implement this. You implement this solution and you follow through on the steps that I'm going to recommend you take to put that into practice and make it work for you. Okay. All right. So there are 4 different levels or different ways in which you will be experiencing imposter syndrome. And it's really useful and important, like that I break these down for you so you can see the difference between the environmental and the internal. And so that when it comes to like understanding how it's holding you back, when it comes to those moments when you might question or feel defensive, as sometimes happens, right? If somebody's talking about imposter syndrome as if they are able to tell you it's something you experience or suffer from or diagnose you, like I can understand that feeling of resistance that you might have. So if that's something you've experienced, I want to speak to that so that you can just take the information I share about how it comes up, how you know it's showing up for you, just take that at face value and you decide for yourself if imposter syndrome is something that comes up for you. And if so, know exactly where to come to me and to my solutions, my tools and what I offer you. And the solution I'm going to be sharing today, you will know exactly where to come to get help with that. That's what's most important for me today. What I don't want and what has been my worry actually over the last, at least probably a year now, is that that you might be out there and you might be having all of these, let's call them signs or symptoms, whatever you want to call it, having all of these experiences, that's a better word, and not knowing where to get help with them, not knowing how to solve for them. And the reason for that not knowing being because of imposter syndrome as a concept, as an idea, being either poo-pooed or dismissed or prejudged, okay? And it being something that you don't want to, not just don't want to admit to having, but don't want to feel you have as if it's like a bad thing. So I want to clear all of that up in this episode by talking through these experiences. I just want you to think about, is this true for me? Do I think like this? Do I feel like this? Do I show up like this? Are these the results that I'm creating for myself? And if the answer is yes to any one or more of those questions, then imposter syndrome is you're in the right place to talk about imposter syndrome, and you're in the right place to get an answer, a solution to your imposter syndrome. Okay. All right. So let's talk to those 4 levels of your experience. Number 1, it's at your thinking level. Now, with internal imposter syndrome, your thoughts, I've described them. It's the thoughts, I'm a fraud, my success is down to luck, any minute now I'm going to be exposed. So exactly those thoughts, or some variation of them. That's exactly how I used to feel. When I first came across like a description, a definition of what imposter syndrome was, and I read those signs. I was reading a book called Unstoppable People by Andrew Gilpin. I think it's out of print now. But when I read it, I couldn't believe how precisely it spoke to my experience. So if this is you, I want to say, yes, I hear you. Imposter syndrome is a thing. It really is. And that messy collection of feelings, they are real. It's called imposter syndrome. And I'm passionate about helping you to solve for that, to build a completely different relationship with yourself on the back of that, so that you can really step up and start performing to your potential. So you're in the right place. Now, some of you will be listening and thinking, yeah, but I don't think that. I don't think I'm a fraud. I don't think my success is down to luck. I know full well how hard I worked to be here. So I want to ask you this. If this is you, do you have the thoughts, I don't belong, I won't fit, like if I go for partnership, I won't fit, I'm the only one, they don't want me, they don't value me, places like this don't want people like me? If you have had any of the thoughts like that, then that is the kind of thoughts that you get with environmental imposter syndrome. Of course, right, your environment makes you feel like an imposter. And we know you feel like an imposter because those thoughts I've just described are the kind of thoughts an imposter would have. I don't belong. I don't fit. Yeah, I'm the only one. Can you see this connection? Can you see the similarity? So that's at a thinking level. So you can see then that imposter syndrome, the 2 sides of the same coin, you can have one set of thoughts that relate to being a fraud and not deserving your success, but then there's a whole other set of thoughts that speak to the same experience of imposter syndrome, but because it comes from outside of you, the way you think about it, the thoughts your brain offers you are slightly different. It doesn't speak to the fact that you don't think you deserve your success. It speaks to the environment that you're in that makes you feel like an imposter. So now let's talk about what happens then. Let's talk about the next level of your experience, which is at the feeling level. We are feeling human beings, even though we're not often aware of our feelings are what drive us. They're what drive our actions, okay? And those feelings come from the thoughts that we have, the thoughts we have about ourselves in this case. And what's really interesting is that although I've given you the example of thoughts that you might have about yourself with internal imposter syndrome, I've given you examples of thoughts that you might have about environmental imposter syndrome. What's interesting is the feelings that those thoughts, either way, both internal and environmental, the feeling that you get in either case is basically the same. This is how we know it's the same thing. It's the feeling of not enoughness. It's the feeling of being excluded. It's the feeling of being alone, of feeling isolated. It's the feeling of being less than. It's the feeling of being other than. All of those feelings. Are they ringing bells? Are they familiar to you? Are they resonating? For sure they are. If you are a black lawyer and you are striving to succeed in a white world, I know you've had those feelings. I've heard it from you, like you word of mouth firsthand. I have had those feelings. And it's just so important to acknowledge those feelings and to connect them to the reason why they're there. All of this, again, is about your understanding of what is going on for you, what's going on in your brain in terms of those thoughts, what's going on in your body in terms of the emotions that you feel from those thoughts, And then let's come to the third level of your experience, which is how you then show up. And this is where you're going to really start to understand how all of this connects to where you are in your career right now, what you are struggling with, what is holding you back, and most importantly, what we need to look at and target, what we can do to change that. Okay? When we can't, I should add this as a caveat or as part of that, when we can't just like change our external environment. So what I'm offering you is a solution you can literally start with right now, today, without needing to wait for the world to right itself, for your firm or your organization to do the right thing, to be better, to be more equal, be more inclusive. You don't have to wait for that to happen. You can be proactively empowering yourself in the meantime, focusing on what you can control, which is your experience. Okay, you have so much control over how you think about it and what you do with that. So you can, with the knowledge that I'm giving you today, take this and effectively what I'm going to be teaching you to do, channel it into building so much confidence, building the confidence to succeed in a white world. And what I want to add here, as we're talking about the emotions, the feelings you experience, whether it's internal imposter syndrome or environmental, note that these thoughts and feelings that I've talked about, they can be constant. So they're there all the time. You're hearing them all the time. You're feeling it all the time. Every day you go into the office, every time you're given a piece of work, when you're even sitting on your desk at your own, you have that underlying feeling, the anxiety, the stress that's produced by that feeling of not enoughness or being excluded or being isolated. Or you can be carrying along just fine, and then something will happen that will trigger your imposter syndrome. A comment is made, or you're given a piece of work that's, let's say it's way below your pay grade, and all of the work allocation has gone to your white colleague who certainly no more qualified than you, and potentially is less qualified or experienced than you. That can trigger your imposter syndrome, right? So sometimes I don't just want you to be aware of the difference there. It can be constant. Other times your experience might be that it just comes out of nowhere because it's been triggered by an event. All right, so speaking then to the third level of your experience, which is the actions you take as a result of those emotions I've just described. It's how you show up on a day-to-day basis with your work. Okay, now I'm not going to go through, there are so many of these different, I call them the secret signs sometimes, because often you can be behaving in this way, showing up to your work in this way, and have no idea that it's being driven by either internal or environmental imposter syndrome. So I've actually got a really long list of those, and I'm going to be creating a new download, an updated download for you where you can actually work through and use it as a checklist. So check the show notes here, because I may well have attached it to the comments below. Otherwise, make sure you're following me on social media and you sign up to my newsletter, because I'm going to be promoting this free downloaded checklist for you in the next couple of weeks. So you definitely want to get hold of it. But for the purposes of this episode, here are some examples. Here's how you know, based on how you're showing up to your work, how you're showing up to your colleagues, how you are behaving, how you are acting in the office, in the face of opportunities, in the face of how you're dealing with work allocation. Here are the examples that I want you to listen out for and think, okay, is that something I experience? Is that something that I do? These examples are a key indicators that you have either internal or environmental imposter syndrome. Telling yourself you need to work twice as hard. That, my friends, is environmental imposter syndrome. Excessively checking your work, saying yes to every request, never being able to push back. You don't delegate, doing it all yourself instead. Second guessing yourself, overthinking, being in your own head, worrying a lot. Needing to be 100% certain before applying for that role. Avoiding the spotlight, staying in the background, letting other people take praise for your work, networking only with people who look like you. Sound familiar? That's environmental imposter syndrome. Staying focused on jumping into champion D and I. And I mean jumping into it and feeling that is you doing stuff to progress your career. Obviously, from a good place, right? Wanting to create change. But there's this sort of subtle thing going on where what's driving your DE&I actions is actually it's like a channeling your career progression and you being proactive in your career, but channeling it into a safe environment of DE&I instead of being, say, for example, more visible, just in a networking room surrounded by people who don't look like you. So it's like, I'm being visible and doing all this DEI work and I'm being visible. So it feels like I'm progressing my career, but actually there's a sort of subtle hiding there that's going on. I want to say that too, if that's something you're doing, like to really watch out for that, check your reasons for that, look underneath the surface of that, because that could well be a sign of your environmental imposter syndrome too. Telling yourself you don't want to be partner, telling yourself you're not good enough, you're not articulate enough, and just generally being mean to yourself, being very intolerant of like small mistakes, beating yourself up over past failures. There are so many examples, so many behaviors and actions that I can see that are resulting from internal environmental imposter syndrome. So now that we've been through those and you've hopefully identified some of those and all of this is starting to become really clear, you're really starting to understand that you have these thoughts that create these feelings that then drive how you show up, and that all of that comes from either your internal, it's either your internal imposter syndrome or your environmental imposter syndrome. Hopefully you've got a clear picture of that. Let's talk about the results that you are creating as a result. Let's talk about how it's holding you back. You're being left behind. So others around you, no more qualified, in some cases less qualified than you, they are being promoted ahead of you as a result of all of this, as a result of imposter syndrome. Your confidence just never grows. It lags so far behind all of your accomplishments. Think about how much you have achieved, and yet you are still doubting yourself so much of the time. Another result is that you feel constantly overwhelmed. That feeling that there's just too much, it's nonstop. And it's like overwhelming. That's the key feeling. That is one of the results of the ways I've just been describing that you are showing up. And then the stress, the anxiety, the worry that is just constant for you. Okay? So those are, if your experience of work right now speaks to any of that, then what I've done for you is trace that back to your internal or your environmental imposter syndrome. So now we spent a lot of time talking and defining, really understanding, getting under the skin of imposter syndrome and like understanding what it is and how it's showing up for you and what's causing it, where it's coming from. Let's talk about how we solve it. Let's talk about the really simple solution that I'm so energized and excited to share with you because of A, how simple it is, and B, because once you decide that this is something you are going to address, once you decide this is something you are going to tackle, and if you're anything like me, you've reached a point where you are just tired. You're tired of feeling what I call the pain of unfulfilled potential, and that's knowing you have more, knowing you're capable of more, remembering like all of the stuff that you've achieved in the past and like feeling nostalgic for that drive, for that excitement to go for a big goal and know you can get it. You're tired of being less than you know yourself to be. You're ready to solve this so you can move on and just really see what you're capable of. In one of my coaching sessions today, one of my clients in Be the First, he said one of the reasons why he's really going for partnership is he wants to see how this story ends. He wants to see what happens next. And I love that for you too. Like, let's solve, I talk about the puzzle of your imposter syndrome. Let's solve it so we can see where you go next. So excited. So the solution is simple. All you have to do is remember who you are. You just have to remember how capable you are, how resilient and resourceful you are. You have to remember how driven, how determined you are, that you can do anything that you set your mind to, that whatever you set your mind to, you can create something extraordinary, that you are unstoppable. You just have to remember all of that about yourself. That's it. That is how you solve your imposter syndrome. That is how, when you encounter it, that's how, when you are living with it constantly, it's how, when it's triggered, all you have to do, and I want this to become your mantra, I want it to become the default that your brain offers you when your imposter syndrome has been triggered. The answer is, I just have to remember who I am. I just have to remember who I am. Here's how you know that this is all it takes, that the solution is this simple. The reason your imposter syndrome holds you back is because it makes you forget who you are. So those external, the environmental factors that take you out of who you are and what's so fantastic about you, and all it does is reveal your difference to everybody else around you, that makes you forget who you are, how capable you are. And by the way, when I say forgetting who you are, I don't mean forgetting where you've come from, forgetting your roots, forgetting your, not being authentic. I mean forgetting what you're capable of, right? So that's what happens environmentally. That's the impact that it has when our environment is not inclusive, when it's not diverse, when we're asked to tone things down or be less assertive, for example. When we experience racism and microaggression, it takes us out of being and remembering who we are and how capable we are. In addition, internally, where it's internal imposter syndrome, all that's happening is we're focusing so much on who we're not, right? Focusing so much on the fact that we feel like a fraud, think our success is down to luck, think we're going to be found out. So much focus on that. Again, it means you're forgetting who you are, forgetting how capable you are and what you are capable of. That's why all you need to do is remember. Remember your capability. Remember everything you've done. Remember everything you've built. Remember who you've become on your way to where you are now. Be where you are now. All of that is just you remembering who you are. And when you can do that, when no matter what the external environment is, and when no matter what the part of your brain that offers that you're a fraud and you don't deserve your success, no matter what triggers your imposter syndrome, you will have the skill, and this is the key, to build the skill of remembering who you are in that moment. And if you can do that and you build that skill and it becomes a muscle that gets stronger and stronger and stronger, you will be so confident. You will have the confidence to succeed in a white world and keep progressing all the way to the top. All right. So let's talk. I'm going to finish this by talking about how you do that. All right. So I've given you the simple, I want to say magical solution, but there's nothing magic about it. This works. I am a living proof, an example of how powerful this solution, how powerful this strategy is. And when you apply it, when you implement it, you're going to experience that as well. So here's what's going to happen. After this session, you're going to go out and you're going to have, the next time you experience imposter syndrome, whether it's environmentally triggered or internally generated, right? The next time you have that experience, you're going to remember this. You're going to remember what I've taught you. And you're going to remember, okay, all I have to do is remember who I am. And then you're going to go, okay, Caroline, I'm about to walk into a meeting. How on earth am I going to do that? What do you mean, remember who I am? And you're going to flail around, just in your head, and really struggle to grasp or grapple with exactly what the practical work of remembering who you are is, what it looks like. And that's where I come in. That's where I've created this very practical step-by-step process that enables you to do that. Now, there's two parts to this that are essential for this solution to work for you. Number one is the process of you literally taking the time to remember, to remind yourself, to reconnect with who you are. Right now, you're so caught up in where you are. At best, you have perhaps 6 months worth of recollection of what you've achieved, what you've done, what you've experienced, who you've become, what you've risen to, the challenges you've faced. At best, you've probably got 6 months worth of tangible, ready and available memory of that. But think about how old you are, think about how far you've come, and how many years going back, year after year after year, of experience and of achievements and of decisions you've made and of hopes and dreams and all of that you've had that are all part of who you are. And that's not even talking about your actual origin, right? And your ethnicity or your culture. I'm just talking about your life experience here. All of that forgotten. So what we need is part one of how you implement the solution of remembering who you are every time your imposter syndrome is triggered, because that's the solution. You just remember who you are. Part one of how you implement that is you take the time to reconnect with who you are, to actually remember. You ask yourself the question, who am I? And then you take those steps to answer it. So there's the process of remembering, which is going to fill you with so much confidence, so much awe, so much respect. That's why I talk about changing your relationship with yourself. How you think about yourself after that process of remembering is going to be completely different. You will feel your confidence rising. You will feel the determination, the drive, the motivation, the resourcefulness, the resilience. It will feel very present. It will feel very accessible to you. That's just from the process of remembering. And then part two of the implementation is the bit where you get to work and you make it work for you. So that's the bit where what we do is we take all of that remembering and that experiencing how amazing you are, how capable you are, what you are capable of doing further. What we do is we take all of that and we package it into a short speech that you can use, that you can say to yourself, a mirror talk, something you'll say to yourself in the mirror in the moment, in the instant that your imposter syndrome has been triggered. In the moment when you're about to walk into a meeting, in the moment when you're walking into a room full of people who don't look like you and you want to find the courage and the confidence to network. You want to package the memory of you, the remembering who you are, we package it into something really tangible you can sort of metaphorically, but literally have in your pocket and pull out at any time in any moment. This has been the missing piece even in the way I've taught this solution to imposter syndrome in the past, I haven't quite managed to, until now, really nail exactly what the imposter speech, because that's what we call it. That's what I've coined as the name for what you do when you take everything that you are and you make it into a pep talk or a mirror talk, or the speech you give yourself when you need confidence and courage in a moment. That imposter speech is the missing piece. That is the bit that bridges the gap between you knowing that you're capable, right? And you actually believing it and showing up in the moment as the highest level of yourself, the most capable version of yourself. Okay, the speech is the key. So step one of the implementation is the process of you actually remembering, connecting with your awesomeness. There is no other word for it. And step two is then condensing, synthesizing everything that you then remember into a short speech that you can use and have as a practical tool in the moment. Now, here's the really exciting news. Apart from the simplicity of that, the simplicity of the solution, remember, that I've given you. Just remember who you are. And then the simplicity, even of the implementation, which is you've got to do the process of actually remembering, and then you've got to create something that is really tangible that you can access at any moment and actually use at any given moment. Really simple, isn't it? Really clean. And I've kept it that way because, well, life is complicated enough. Being a Black lawyer is certainly complicated and challenging enough, right? And also for this solution, I want you to be able to access it really easily, really quickly. That's why I've actually stripped it down to its bare bones. Here's the best bit. I have created a brand new program that is going to do all of this for you. It is a step-by-step program that you access online. You can do at your own pace in whichever format that you want to. You can listen to it on audio. You can watch the video. You even have a PDF of like the workbooks that you can download. You can work through this process of remembering who you are. You're not just lost to try and remember and sit there on your own. I literally have created a 5-step process and turn that process into a program that you can work through in your own time, dip into, go back to over and over and over again so that you can remember, so that you never forget ever again quite how capable, how extraordinary, how unstoppable you are. And I've created that in a program, and the program is called Confident Black Lawyers, because that is who you will be. At the end of that program, you will be a confident Black lawyer. Confidence. I know how important it is to you. I know how desperately you crave it. I know how desperately I craved it for so many years. I wish I had had this program just that was online and available for me to access, to watch, to follow through at my own pace, to fit it in with my schedule when I wasn't in control of my schedule, especially in the early days of my career. But just to have this one place that I could go and access all of the teachings that I needed to help me really tap into the power of who I am and the capability of who I am. To have that would have been worth its weight in gold. And that's why I've created it for you. And I'm so excited to share it with you. All right. So I'm going to end there. That is a little teaser for what's coming. You're going to be hearing so much more about Confident Black Lawyers, about what it will do for you, how it will change things for you, who you will become as a result of doing this program, and how, most importantly, it will completely change your relationship with imposter syndrome. It is the answer to your imposter syndrome. If you are not just a mid to senior level Black lawyer, but if you are even a senior, a partner, or a GC Black lawyer, if you're a junior, a mid-level associate, you're a trainee, you are a paralegal, even if you are a student aspiring to be a lawyer, and you want the confidence to succeed in a white world, then join Confident Black Lawyers, my new program designed to fit in with the demands and the time constraints of this industry, and to build your confidence in who you are so that imposter syndrome never holds you back again, and in fact becomes the opportunity, it becomes your strength, it becomes the thing that helps you to connect with how capable you are, how unstoppable you are, and helps you to fulfill your potential. So if that is you, make sure you tune into the podcast every single week. Make sure you watch the videos if you subscribe on YouTube every single week. Make sure you're connected with me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, or on Facebook if you want to connect with me there. Make sure you stay connected. Tick the bell in my profile so that you do not miss an announcement. I'm going to be talking about Confident Black Lawyers. It is launching in the next few weeks. Make sure you are ready and listening out for it. This is going to be exactly what you've been waiting for, and I can't wait to get it into your hands. That's it from me. I'll speak to you next time. Bye for now.